Hello, friends. Welcome back to another episode of the William Bonney podcast. We're just doing a video today of how I got into crime. It was one of the questions that spilled over from the last podcast, and I thought it deserved a video of its own, really. It's not a unique story, but I just thought it was a story that starts small and leads up to ending up in prison. So let's just have a look at some of the things that led me to being a criminal. So how I started in crime, really very similar to a lot of other people at my age when I was maybe 7 or 8. You'd maybe petty shoplift some sweets from the local spar shop. Just walking past, putting a few lollies in your pocket or a few penny sweets, that sort of thing. It was nothing major, but it's just testing the water, isn't it? It's breaking the rules at that little early age, realising you can get away with it. And it's that whole reward thing. As a kid, you might as well be stealing gold bars, stealing a handful of sweets and jelly babies and stuff. That's all kids want, isn't it? That's the gold nuggets. So, petty shoplifting, like a lot of other kids, on my way to and from school, nicking them. And then it moved quickly on. I knew that doing that was a risk. I must have nearly got caught a couple of times or something. So what I did is I would show my little mates how easy it was to nick stuff. And I would basically say that, I'll go on lookout, you three rob as many sweets as you can, and then we'll split it outside. So I don't know what it is, sometimes you see, so I'm just getting, even at that early age, I was already getting a little gang together. And I don't know what it is, but, you can see it in puppies sometimes. There's always a dominant puppy. When we was in one of our psychology courses in prison one day, the psychologist lady, when she did her assessment of me, she said I was a natural leader. And even just doing this video now, I've just looked back at that, and it did make me laugh. That as soon as things got a little bit hot, I soon put other people to work. Even at the age of like 8, I was running a little gang of shoplifters. The next thing, that was as bad as it got for a few years. I think you get a slap on the wrist, when you get caught shoplifting, and it stops you from doing anything for a little while, normally. But then our mum moved us up to a city area. We're born in the southwest, down in Cornwall, where things are very quiet and kind of nothing really happens. And then, my mum, after my dad died, my mum moved us back up to Nottinghamshire, where she was from, and it's a whole different ball game up there. We were outsiders. So my mum took one of the only jobs she could get, which was a caring job, putting old ladies and sick people to bed in the evenings, which meant she wasn't around from when we came home from school until about 9, half 9 at night. If she'd had a difficult night, she might not get home till like 10, half 10. So we were pretty much just looking after ourselves from that young age. So from around 11ish. I was 11, my little brother was about 9. We started going off the rails just because mum wasn't around. And we lived on an estate that was quite bad, but mum found us, a childminder on an estate that was even worse. This was the kind of estate where at 11 you were being challenged by the men. You had to drop some names of who you knew and, where you were going on the estate. Otherwise, you'd be chased off. So this was a rough place. And she we would spend our time with her kids, just roaming around and making a nuisance of ourselves, basically. Over the back of where she lived, there was a field, and just on the other side of that field, there was a boarded up council-run care home that had closed down and had been out of use for years. And it used to have a little security guard that would kind of wander around, and it became fun to get chases from him. But one day we managed to find one of the boards that was hanging loose, and we managed to get into this care home. And again, we're only young kids. We're not in there to kind of do anything massively criminal, but it was exciting to kind of break into somewhere that we weren't supposed to be. And we went round, and it wasn't a small place. It was about the size of a school. It was 2 floors in some places, and it had catering and kitchens and offices and rooms and everything. It was massive. And as a young kid, it was exciting running around, and it was dark, and And it was wild. And that again in itself doesn't sound like it's a crime. Well, it obviously is. It's breaking, entering, trespassing, all of the rest of it. But it's just a pushing of the boundaries again. So we're not shoplifting sweets anymore. We're breaking and entering now. And even though it's an empty building, it's still pushing the boundaries. We were bored kids. We weren't bad kids, but we were just bored. The carer that we were with, when my mum was at work, used to just send us out to play. There was no sitting down and doing homework. It was either sitting in front of the telly if it was raining, or it was just basically get outside and play if it was half decent weather. And we'd just make mischief of ourselves on the estate, or round and about. It got a little bit more serious. The next crime I committed, I got myself a little job as a paper boy, and we used to come in through the back door of the paper shop, and the papers would be stacked up in piles there waiting for us, and you'd shove them into that big paperboy sack and cycle off. And one day I noticed, because obviously it's the back room of the shop we go into, so there's stock back there as well. There's sweets and there's stuff about, and one day I noticed on the floor there's a big box of scratch cards, National Lottery scratch cards, and it looks very tempting because they're gift wrapped up in plastic. There was loads and loads of them, in big strips. And every morning I'd go in there for about a week and I'd look at them, and I'd almost get that like buzz of excitement, as in just grab one of those packets and be off. And then one day I did pluck up the courage, and I grabbed about 3 of the bundles that were in this box, and I threw them in my bag, and I shot off out of there. And long story short, I ended up getting caught because you can't just cash in these scratch cards. They have to be activated before you can cash them in. So we had hundreds of useless scratch cards. So me and my pals were very disappointed, and ended up getting a caution from the police because obviously you can't do that. But again, I'm still 12 or 13. I'm not at an age where anything can happen to me really. But that was my first proper run-in with the police, and I got a caution, a slap on the wrist. It was a taste of the fire. They showed you the cells. It stinks. It's horrible down there. They kind of give you the little scary little tour of the police station. But it's it's in and out. It's a flash in the pan. It's putting your foot into burning hot water for a second, and then you're taking it out, and you realise it's not that bad. So again, maybe that was just me. Maybe a lot of kids would never commit a crime again once they saw that. But for me, it was kind of just a little, little taster, and that was it. Now after this, my mum gets an opportunity to come back down to Cornwall and work down here. So she speaks to me and my little brother, and we agree that Cornwall's so much better than Nottinghamshire, and we head back down to Cornwall. Now, when I get back down here, the next crime, again, it's petty, but it's just pushing those boundaries just ever so slightly again. So it was for, I think it was vandalism. Is it vandalism where you spray paint the wall? We painted, I surfed because I was, from the southwest, and we painted locals only on the harbour wall. And it was a bit of a tradition. This wasn't the first time this had been painted. It was a little, it's tribal. It's, like any little gang has their patches. We were a little gang of surfers, and we wrote locals only on the harbour wall. And it was my fault I got caught that day because we were supposed to come down and do it at sort of 5 a.m. But I overslept, and I ended up getting the bus down, and we did it about sort of 6:30, 7 o'clock, and the lifeguards were just starting, and she phoned the police, and the police were waiting for me and my mate when we got to the end of the harbour. So again, taken back down to the police station, given a caution. Again, all of these little crimes I'm committing, they're all petty, it's all pointless, it's all terrible, not terrible little things, but it's not the end of the world. But I've just pushed my boundary in every direction. I'm just, I lean against one thing, I go too far, I come back, and I lean the other way. And then, I go too far, and then I come back, and I lean in another direction. It's, there isn't it's not like fighting, or I haven't been just constantly stealing. Although the next one, again, I put my foot back in the water. So the next petty crime, and it's bordering on more serious now, was theft. I was given the opportunity to work in a surf shop, and I completely abused their trust. But what happened is I felt like I was justified, and it was completely wrong. I was in the wrong. We worked for them for a month in the surf shop. The guys he employed for the summer let him down. They were grumbling. They weren't getting paid enough, so the two lads left and kind of left him in the lurch. So, the shopkeeper knew me and my pal because we were hanging around on the beach for all the time. So he hired us. We worked in there for a month or two. Everything was going great, and then the original two lads said that they would come back. They were sorry, and they would come back. So the shop owner basically ditched me and my mate in favour of returning these two guys that had dropped him. So I was disgruntled by this because I thought, we've saved you and now you're dropping us. So by means of that, what I did, because I knew the shop setup basically from working in there, I knew he had lots of stock in the back again. So what I would do is I would ask, I'd come in after, being surfing, and I'd ask them if I could go and use the toilet, which was in the back. As I was going through the back, I'd grab a load of stock, some, wetsuits, trousers, t-shirts, whatever I could get my hands on. And I'd take it into the bathroom and I'd shove it out the window and into the alleyway behind the surf shop. I'd go back out through the shop, thank them. I'd run around the back of the shop, bag up all this gear in a black bag, and then I'd hop over the wall and be gone. I did that a few times, and one time I got caught. And again, back down the police station, another caution, because I'm never really committing the same crimes twice. I'm just getting cautions. So it never really got any more serious. And I ended up doing a bit of community service for the vandalism, the painting. I had to go down to a local community centre and paint over some graffiti, funny enough. But again, it was one morning, someone came and picked me up, and took me down there. I painted for 4 or 5 hours. Someone kind of gave me a stern talking to, and then I was gone again. So yes, I was starting to feel the resistance. I was starting to get in trouble. It was starting to get a little bit more serious. But again, it felt like just putting your foot in that water, and I was able, the deeper I was going into it, the more I was able to resist. So I knew that, all right, yeah, it's going to be a day of pain, but after that, nobody's on your back. You did what you wanted, you got what you wanted, and then you had a day of pain, and then it was all back to normal again. So I don't know what the answer is. Maybe a harder shock for kids when they're getting into crime. Maybe giving people longer sentences to start with and then shorter sentences later on. I don't know. But for me, definitely that little path into crime wasn't a resisting one. Maybe I'm just dumb. Maybe I just don't know what's good for me. So then the last one that I'm going to talk about before it kind of got really serious was my mum fell out with her boss. And this guy used to run a care home, and it was for learning disabled guys, and they get a lot of benefits. So they would be getting a lot of carers allowance, they would be getting a lot of disability living allowance, that sort of thing. And he would basically go and get all of their benefits for them and then hand them over maybe 20 quid a week in kind of pocket money. So it was a assisted living house, all their food was provided, everything was basically included in their benefits, which he would take all of in cash. And then basically just give them sort of 20 quid pocket money to be kind of walking around with for the week. And these guys were heavily disabled. Some of them, a lot of them didn't have a clue. They wouldn't understand even, if you gave them the £20, they wouldn't know what to do with it, so he was taking advantage of these guys. And when my mum fell out with him and then, subsequently left that employment and went somewhere else, I had a lot of inside knowledge of his house and his layout and where he used to stack this cash. Now, he was profoundly deaf as well. He had hearing aids and things. And I know in the evenings he had a little sauna in his living quarters. He used to have a house that was attached to the care home, and his living quarters was sort of bolted on the side of them. And he built himself a little sauna room in his living quarters. And what he'd do in the evening, sometimes he'd have his rock music way up loud so that you could actually hear it. And then he'd go and sit in the sauna. So what I did, I must have sat and scouted him out for a few nights, and then the night finally came round that he was going to go in the sauna. You hear the music, it's all loud. I see him with his little towel on, and then I look through the frosted window and I can see him go into the sauna. So I know he's going to be in there for like 20 minutes. So I quickly duck in through the back door, go upstairs, go to the desk where I know that he normally keeps all his money, and there's thousands of pounds up there. So I just swipe it all into my bag, and I'm off. And, the music's so loud, he doesn't even know. I'm in and out. I'm like a cat burglar. Now, apologies, but this is very exciting. This is, boner material for cat burglars. So this is a rush that you can't describe. Committing crimes like this and getting away with it, it's the adrenaline itself is a drug that you get high from. And when you're constantly committing these kind of like very risky crimes, it can become really addictive, and a normal life becomes dull, boring in comparison. So I'm now, 14 or 15, with about 3,500 in my pocket back in 96, I think we're talking. So I'm earning more. I've got more in my pocket than most, adults are earning in 6 months' time. So it's I'm doing very well. Now, obviously, I splurge this money on rubbish, and my mum. It's a constant battle because I'm obviously still at home with my mum at this point, and it's a constant battle to be able to buy stuff and lie about where new bits and pieces are coming from, and trying to basically explain why I've got all this money right around me, and then when the money would run out, I'd basically go back there and tax him again. So I'd wait for the same situation. It became more and more difficult because obviously, he started to, I think he became aware that I must have been ducking in through the back door. So he would lock the back door, so I'd have to go in through a skylight. The skylight was basically in the office. So I would have to wait again until I saw him. I remember one time I think I didn't have time to sort of sit outside his house all week. So I watched him and I saw him go off to go and get his dinner. Now, he got his dinner from the care home side. And so as soon as I saw him walk out, I know there'd be about 5 or 10 minutes while he was cooking something. So I'd quickly jump in through the skylight, run down, same situation. Sometimes I think the least I got from him was about £1,000, and the most was that first time when it was about £3,500. But I taxed him about 4 or 5 times over a couple of years. And I don't even think it was that long. It was probably about 18 months. And that basically probably just put the nail in the coffin for me, as in, that work ethic was gone. I knew that if you were just willing to put the work in and be brave enough in the face of crime, that you could earn exceptional amounts of money. So I was lost from sort of that age. And later on, that's when I started to find, the last couple of robberies that I did on him, I was funding going and buying drugs, because my friends, the circles I was knocking around with, were starting to get older. Some people were starting to smoke weed. Some people were starting to take pills when they went out. So through my connections with my family, who aren't exactly law-abiding, I was able to source drugs. If not through my family's connections, it was through people at college or friends, things like that. I was able to get hold of the dealers, and because I had, at least £1,000 at a time wrapped around me, I would be able to go and buy larger quantities of drugs and then split them up into smaller quantities and give them to my friends and my circle. And then from that point on, it basically, it just went really bad from there. I started to party more than I was working, as in selling drugs, or I'd be taking the drugs myself, so you don't make as much profit, and then you can't pay your rent and bills and everything else, life on top of that. And I ended up committing a robbery. I armed myself with a knife and went into a convenience shop and took the lad that was filling up a counter full of drinks and pulled him behind the till, got the money from the till, and left. And I changed both of our lives forever at that point. It's something I deeply regret. It's something I don't promote. It's just the fact. That's what happened. And from that point onwards, I was lost. I spent the next 10 years in and out of prison, never being out longer. In that 10-year period, I was never out for more than 6 months. The longest period was 6 months. The shortest period was 24 hours. That's how I got into crime. That's the slippery slope from stealing sweets to holding a knife to someone in a convenience store. It's not the path that everyone takes. There were plenty of warning signs along the way, plenty of red flags, plenty of situations where I could have turned my life around and gone back. But the temptation was just way too much for me. The vast sums of money that I knew were available if you just knew where to look and were brave enough. So that was my story. That's the way I got into crime. It's something I deeply regret. I know that if I'd knuckled down at an early age, back in the school days, if I'd valued doing homework and achievements and sports more than running riot at night and misbehaving. So that would be my tip to parents now listening, wondering how they could stop a teenager who's on that path or possibly determined to get themselves into bother, would be to fill up their evenings and weekends with positive activities, reading, learning, sports. Maybe guide them without them even realising it, but just don't let them roam the streets on their own. You might think they're just around their friend's house, but they're definitely up to no good. All right, thank you very much. Like, subscribe, comment, follow me on Instagram. Thank you very much. Cheers. Now, bye-bye.